Disappearance. This is not a missing person case, because people who disappear are silent. They leave a void behind, but not a sound. Yet in this incident there was no silence. Every night at the same hour, a phone would ring. And the person calling that phone, according to official records, did not exist. It was exactly 03:11 a.m. When the phone was answered, no one spoke. There was only the sound of someone breathing, slow, irregular, as if terrified. And then a mother heard her daughter's voice. On the western coast of Germany, there is a seaside town so small it cannot be found on maps. Crowded in the summer, but almost forgotten when winter arrives. In this town where everyone thinks they know each other, no one actually knows anyone. Maria Cara was one of them. She was 32 years old, quiet, methodical. Her life ran almost like clockwork. She woke up at the same time every morning, walked the same coastal path, and shopped at the same market. According to her neighbors, she was a woman who kept to herself and harmed no one. According to police records, she was an unremarkable, ordinary woman. That evening, Maria left her house as usual. She was neither rushed nor insistent. She locked the door, turned off the light, and stepped out onto the street without leaving a single trace. To this day, it is still unknown who the last person to see her was. Maria never returned after that night. The next morning, she didn't show up for work. Her phone was off. Her mother's messages went unanswered. At first, the neighbors didn't think much of it. When the police entered the house, everything was in its place. Her wallet and ID were on the table. Her phone was on the charger. There was no sign of forced entry, no broken windows. The house didn't look like someone had left in a hurry. The case was soon closed with a single sentence: voluntary disappearance. But her mother never accepted this, because if Maria had left, she would have called. If she had left, she would have sent a message. If she had left, she wouldn't have remained silent. On the third night, as her mother was trying to sleep in her bed, her phone rang. Her daughter's name was on the screen. It was 3:11 a.m. Her hands trembling, she answered. "Maria," she called out. No answer. Only the sound of someone breathing on the other end. Deep, ragged, as if trapped in a dark place. Just as the mother was about to hang up, a voice as faint as a whisper was heard. "Mom!" The line cut off at that moment. And after that night, this phone continued to ring at the same hour every night. Maria was missing, but her phone was still alive. The mark of 03:11. 03:11 a.m. This hour held no ordinary meaning. It wasn't an alarm, nor was it a randomly chosen time for a conversation. But after Maria disappeared, this hour turned into a disturbing obsession for everyone in town. Every single night, without missing a single second, the phone would ring at exactly 03:11 a.m. And all of these calls were coming from the phone of a missing woman. A woman whose phone should have been off, or rather, should have fallen silent long ago. After the first call, the mother went to the police. The records were examined. The duration of the call was short. There was no speech, only an indistinct sound in the background. The officer on duty interpreted it as a line disconnection, but the call came again the next night. Same time, same number. And again, no answer. By the third night, the police began to officially record the situation. This was no longer a coincidence, because the calls didn't just arrive at the same time. They were cut off after the same duration and ended with the same silence. When the technical team analyzed the voice recordings, they initially found nothing unusual. The breathing sounded human. It wasn't mechanical. It didn't come from a device or an automated system. But after listening repeatedly with headphones, another suppressed sound was noticed beneath the breathing, rhythmic, intermittent, and constant, as if water were dripping somewhere. Drip, pause, drip again. This sound was identical in every recording. Same intervals, same tone. This detail changed the direction of the case, because there was no sound of dripping water in the house where Maria lived. There were no facilities open at night in the vicinity. But when the town's old records were examined, the existence of a water treatment plant closed years ago was revealed. The chilling part was this. In the file of another woman who had disappeared 15 years ago, there was a similar detail. That file also mentioned a call received in the middle of the night. At that time, because technology was insufficient, the voice recordings hadn't been analyzed in detail. The file had been closed. The incident buried. 2 disappearances, 2 calls, 2 midnights, and the same sound of water in the background. For the police, this was no longer a possibility. It was a connection. Maria's calls weren't just a cry for help. This was an attempt to leave a trail, and someone every night at the same time, in the same place and in the same way, was reminding them of her existence. Her 3:11 a.m. was no longer just a time. It was a sign, and this sign was becoming too definitive to be ignored. The abandoned facility. The calls coming at 03:11 a.m. were no longer just a mystery. They were searching for an address. When the police re-examined the signal logs, they noticed something crucial. Although each call was made on different days, the final ping of the signal was almost identical. It was a region where the coverage was weakest, unmarked on maps, a place where no one dared to venture at night. That was the site of the old water treatment plant, closed for years. According to official records, it was abandoned. But abandoned places are not always empty. The police team entered the facility during daylight hours. The doors were rusted. Most of the windows were broken, and the walls were soaked in dampness. There was no electricity, yet there was a strange order inside. The trash wasn't scattered randomly. Some areas looked as if they had been specifically cleaned. The most striking detail was the marks on the floor. Footprints. They weren't old. They had formed after the rain and hadn't been wiped away yet. This meant someone had been here recently. When the records from the nights of the calls were re-examined, It was revealed that a base station near the facility had signaled briefly. This indicated that a device was being actively used in the area. But the facility's power had been cut off years ago. This meant the phone had to be running on an external power source, a planned move. This is not a coincidence. It is a plan. During the search inside, a door leading to the basement of the main building was found. The door wasn't locked, but it looked as if it hadn't been opened for a long time. As they descended the stairs, the air grew colder. The humidity was denser, and that sound, that rhythmic water sound heard in the background of the recordings, was much clearer here. It wasn't dripping water. It was a continuous flow passing through a pipe. Same rhythm, same tone. In the basement, in the middle of the concrete floor, there was a socket. It was newly installed. The cables weren't coming from the wall, but were hanging from above. Only one thing was plugged into the socket, a phone charger. But there was no phone in sight. It was as if someone had specifically left something here and then taken it back. This showed that Maria's calls weren't a moment of panic, but were made with controlled timing. Just as the team was about to leave the facility, an officer's phone vibrated. A number appeared on the screen. A familiar name was written. Maria, it wasn't 03:11 a.m., but the call had come. The officer answered. No one spoke, only the same breathing, the same water sound, and this time, before the call was cut, a clear clink was heard, the sound of a metal door closing. At that moment, everyone thought the same thing. If Maria was still alive, she wasn't alone, and someone had seen them at the facility. This phone did not belong to just one person. It never had. When the technical team put those brief, fragmented recordings through frequency analysis weeks later, the freezing truth finally came to light. The first 30 seconds of the raw audio took the breath away from every officer in the room, because the mother, who thought she had heard Maria's voice that night, had actually witnessed part of a choir. It wasn't just Maria in those recordings. The voices overlapped, followed one another, and echoed as if passing through the same dark tunnel. The sound waves on the computer screen showed 7 different peaks. This meant 7 different throat structures, 7 different heartbeats, and 7 different tragedies. The silence in the room was shattered. When the audio engineer hit the play button, the first voice belonged to Maria, Mom. Immediately after, the voice of the woman who had disappeared 15 years ago was heard. Can you hear me? Then another, then another. They were all saying the same sentence, in the same tone, with the same paralyzing fear. The sentences were synchronized as if coming from a single mouth. The transitions between the voices were so seamless that an ordinary ear might mistake it for the cry of a single woman. But when listened to carefully, the unique timbre and terror of each voice became distinct. These were all women marked as missing in official records, their files left to gather dust on forgotten shelves. This was not a phone call. It was an archive, A sinister collection that someone had meticulously gathered over the years, broadcasting it to the world every midnight at 03:11 a.m. Every time the phone rang, it was an announcement that another woman had been added to that recording room. When the clock struck exactly 03:11, the mysterious perpetrator wasn't just dialing a number. He was opening an exhibition. The voices of 7 different women merged at the same second and frequency, collapsing over the town like a nightmare. The most terrifying part was this: at the end of the recordings, there was an 8th gap of silence that didn't belong to anyone yet. The 8th breath hadn't been taken, but its place was ready. This phone wasn't a clue for Maria's rescue. It was a bloody herald that a new name was about to be added to the list. No one said missing anymore. Everyone was waiting to see who the next name would be. Some files never close. They are simply buried under new lies. For Detective Martin, this case had never been just work. He was the boy who had heard the very first call from the water treatment facility 15 years ago. He was the only one who recognized his mother's voice in that distorted recording. The only one who had held his breath every night at exactly 03:11 a.m. ever since. Martin didn't become a policeman to seek justice. He did it to finish a goodbye that had been stolen from him. Yet as the truth surfaced from beneath the rusted layers of the facility, he realized once again that justice was merely a toy in the hands of the powerful. The facility's history was darker than anyone admitted. It wasn't just a water treatment plant. It had been an experimental site, protected for years by the town's most influential families and local authorities. The rhythmic sound everyone believed to be flowing water was something else entirely. Massive bellows pumping air into underground bunkers. Maria and the other 7 women had not been chosen at random. They were living witnesses to secrets the town was desperate to erase. When Martin traced the power socket and the phone charger found in the basement, he uncovered the final proof. The cables led to an old power line connected directly to the town hall. The perpetrator wasn't an outsider or a hidden monster. It was someone seated in the most trusted, respected positions at the very heart of the town. The official conclusion arrived exactly as expected. Insufficient evidence. The facility was sealed under an emergency demolition order. Concrete buried the footprints. Maria's case was marked unsolved and archived. Overnight, every piece of Martin's evidence vanished. No one searched for Maria anymore. No one wanted to remember the voices of those 7 women. Life continued as if the phones had never rung. But the story didn't end there. On the night Martin placed his resignation letter on his desk, he sat alone in his silent home. Rain tapped against the windows, echoing the same rhythm he had heard in the recordings. Time lost meaning. Names no longer mattered. When justice fell silent, darkness found its voice. The clock struck 03:11 a.m. It was always the same hour. This time Martin's personal phone vibrated on the table. There was no number on the screen. Only 3 words flashed back at him. Your turn. The screen fades to black. Some files never close. They wait.